Today I thought we would talk a little bit about some books. I have been gathering some prepping and survival related books, paper books that is, into my collection, and I wanted to say a few words about them. It is not going to be a real review, but rather a discussion about what I think about the books in general. I thought this would be a relevant time to talk about them as the INF treaty, which is the nuclear armament treaty for storing nuclear weapons in Europe between the United States and Russia, which was founded during the Cold War but has been in effect in one form or another for decades. And that was finally ended today, so that brings some potential new concerns into people living in the area affected, which is Europe as well as Russia and the US. But enough about that. Let's go into the books themselves. So I have a few books here which I own, and I'll be going over them one by one and just giving you the short info on all of them. So the first book I have here is called Survival Hacks: Over 200 Ways to Use Everyday Items for Wilderness Survival, and it's by Creek Stewart. I got this book some time ago. It's a paperback with an MSRP of $16.99 US, categorized as sports. Wilderness survival is apparently sports. What I do like about this book is it's about 250 pages with the indexes and the reference data. It's quite simple, and the hacks here are actually pretty practical. This would be an actual book to have with you when you don't have things prepared in advance. Which is very different than the actual prepping books in my mind, and I'll go into a little bit more detail why that is later. But this has very practical things you can do for survival or prepping type of things with run-of-the-mill items. So I would think this would be a nice book, for example, for a non-prepper friend as a gift, maybe even a funny gift. They think it's a joke or something, but it might actually come in handy sometime. But yes, as you can see, the pictures are pretty simple. They're almost like diagrams, even though they're a little bit like simplified versions of photographs, like they would have been drawn over photographs. But yeah, a lot of these are just very simple things to do. Each page just describes, so it's not really a proper step-by-step guide. As you can see here, on the topic of a rope vise, it's just explaining how you would go about doing this. It's not a step-by-step guide, even though it says start by, but it's more of an abstract, explaining how to use knife, sharpening surfaces, how to use your fingers as a clock. So this would be an actual book to keep with you, maybe in your car, perhaps even in a survival bag of some sort. But it's not really for prepping. It's more of survival situations with little gear. But overall, I think it's a good book. It's an interesting, kind of easy to read book for anybody, really. So I would recommend this. Alright, the next one is by Jim Cobb. I have two books by Jim Cobb. The first one is called Prepper's Long-Term Survival Guide: Food, Shelter, Security, Off-the-Grid Power and More Life-Saving Strategies for Self-Sufficient Living. It is also about the same price, $15.95 US, paperback, and it's around 190 pages with the index. This isn't really something to read when you have a problem. This is a guide more for how to prepare. So you would buy this in advance, read it through, and kind of get ideas about all of the different things you should be getting beforehand and preparing for. So it lists products to buy, and it lists even all kinds of even books here. For example, the author is recommending another book called Field Guide to Edible Wild Plants. Get the edition appropriate for your area. By the way, I'll be talking about this in the end, not the book specifically, but the idea. So this is really a reference guide to what you kind of should be buying and getting. If you're a prepper already, you're looking at YouTube videos, you're reading articles online, there's not really very much new here. I wouldn't perhaps buy this book if you're tight on money, but if you just want to build a prepping related library, why not? It's not a bad book, but most of it is just kind of a list to keep in mind. The next one, also by Jim Cobb. This is a much smaller book, only about 130 pages, with the index, but priced the same, called Prepper Survival Hacks, 50 DIY Projects for Life-Saving Gear, Gadgets and Kits. This is an actual step-by-step guide compared to the first one. So, for example, here, I just randomly opened to the section about seed tape, so it goes actually step 1, step 2, step 3, and so on. This is a kind of a project book. Most of these are also things that you can kind of do in preparation. So when you have a real situation on hand, this is not really the book how to survive. This is more how to prepare for a survival situation. A lot of these are kind of inexpensive options to store-bought items. This book I like a little bit more. It's more for household items. The one minor inconvenience is that the pictures are black and white and they are very, very small. So in some of the steps it's very hard to see what is going on. So for example here, in this section titled Fire from Electricity, the pictures are supposed to show how to ignite some steel wool with a 9-volt battery, but you can't see anything from the pictures. You wouldn't know if that's on fire or not, so it's just explaining it. That's my only real gripe about this. Other than that, this is a pretty good book. I would definitely have it handy, and let's say you want to do a simple weekend project, some kind of prepping related thing, just flip through this book and build yourself a belt pouch. So pretty good book, better than the previous one for a prepper in my mind. The next book I have is by John D. McCann, called Practical Self-Reliance, Reducing Your Dependency on Others. It's a slightly larger book again, 320 something pages with the index. This is very, very different. This is more of an explanation about the author, his family, and his preparedness situation, strategies, and how he's doing things. So it goes on to real experiences of kind of homesteading and living on a farm, preparing in there. It has a lot of pictures. They're pretty good quality, even though they're black and white. But most of them are, kind of showcases. This is the solar oven built by the author and his wife. Okay, that's not really gonna help you, other than perhaps give you an idea that maybe a solar cooker would be good. So this is more of a story, really. A lot of the chapters are explaining how he got some ideas or speculating about a situation where you would use them, and then a little bit going into what the actual thing is that you're supposed to do. But this is not a how-to guide at all. So if you're looking for that, then this isn't the one for you. But it's an interesting read about the lifestyle. Perhaps it's not your lifestyle. This is a little bit on the sort of far end of the prepping ideology, I would say. But it's an interesting read, and probably you would get some ideas from this. So all of this really really nice books. And the last one here I wanted to talk about, which I mentioned in an earlier video, is this called Surviving the Economic Collapse by Fernando Aguirre. The picture on the cover, it actually makes a joke about it in the back. It says, "Nuke caught your attention, fine, that's the idea, now relax. The world is not going to end." So it's just an attention grabber, but as you can see, there is the dollar sign inside the mushroom cloud. So this is an actual book about actual experiences from a person who lived through the economic collapse in Argentina in 2001. It's a surprisingly kind of, how would I say, relaxed text. It's not very serious either. There's a lot of jokes in there, and a lot of stories. You can see there. I just randomly opened to a page, and it's like a novella even, but it's not a novella. It's really a how-to guide. There's no pictures in this. It's all text, but it's interesting. A couple of the sort of notes for this is that it goes into a lot of detail about weapons. There's dozens and dozens of pages about guns, ammunition, different kinds of ammunitions, how to stock them, what kind of ammunition is good. So if that's not your thing, then sort of half of the book is probably not really relevant to you. But it also goes into topics that the others absolutely don't. So there are things like planning for relocation. Which countries would probably be more stable, or even different states in the US would be better suited for relocation after an economic collapse. So this is specifically about the collapse of the economy in the country that you are living in. Whereas the other ones are kind of overall preparedness for some kind of crisis situation. So it's an interesting angle from that point of view. It's very different than the other books, but I highly recommend it because these kind of things have not happened and I'm obviously very glad they haven't in the modern world so many times, in the kind of civilized part of the world where you have all the amenities and you have a proper grid and rule of law. That hasn't broken down so many times that we have a lot of experiences about it. So I think that's an excellent book to have a little bit of a perspective from a person who actually lived through all of this. So that's highly recommended. Those are the books that I have and I recommend. Other than that, I had a few other things about book related things. I like paper books. The reason is I'm assuming that in any kind of a larger crisis situation, the electricity and the internet connectivity is the first thing to go. So you can't rely on your access to the internet. I also don't necessarily trust ebooks very well. What if I lose my only device? I lose everything there. So I like to have the paper versions. But the thing is with the paper versions is if you have to bug out and you leave your library at home, then it's no help to you. So you can't just buy the books and have them and then plan to read them when you get into the problems. So you have to actually read them before and decide what you want to do with them, which makes it a little bit sometimes a time waster when you buy a book and it's absolutely not what you were expecting it to be, which is why I wanted to talk about this here. A couple of things you should have definitely are maps to the location where you live or are located in, and I'm not talking about the immediate vicinity of your house. You should know that area even without a map. But I'm talking about a couple of 100 kilometers or miles around where you live, a detailed map from there. Again, if the electronic devices, perhaps internet connectivity on your GPS device or whatever goes down, and you need to know elevation curves, you need to know where roads are going and so on. Have local maps. That would be something to have. Another thing which is not very often discussed, which I was thinking about, are repair manuals and other reference books. So whatever devices you have, your car, perhaps a motorcycle, you might have some non-electrical machines and devices that you use, maybe they work on propane or butane or something like that. Have repair manuals and reference books for those, because if there's a problem and you can't access the internet, how are you going to fix that problem without the books? That's something to have. What I do think are a little bit questionable are these, which was recommended in one of these, was the edible plants type of thing. I've been foraging mushrooms for a large amount of my life, and I would still be very careful about picking any mushrooms that I'm not 100% sure with what they are, because mushrooms can be deadly poisonous. So don't buy some reference books for plants or mushrooms or something like that and then just use them when you need to survive, because you're gonna not look at the pictures and the guides well enough, and you're gonna pick something that's poisonous. So if you want to learn to forage plants or mushrooms or something like that, prepare for that beforehand. It's good to have those reference books for if you find that one single thing that you're not sure of, you can check it. But I definitely wouldn't count on buying the reference books and then when you start to forage, then you're gonna look up if you can eat it or not. Definitely don't do that. And also, for example, for mushrooms, they actually, the mushrooms that you pick and eat, those are the blooming fruits, so to say, of the actual fungus which is living underground. So they're going to be in the same place every year. If you find a good mushroom place for some mushrooms you can eat, go there every year and don't tell anybody and just keep it for yourselves. That's what the good foragers do. Another thing is and this is the exception to this idea, this book, is those how-to books for certain very specific apocalypse scenarios. Those haven't happened, so why would you trust somebody just making a hypothesis and telling you exactly what to do in a situation like that? I wouldn't trust those experts so much. But that's it. That's my discussion about the books. I'll link to all of these below, and like I said, I would kind of recommend them all, but the three ones that I would really pick from here are the survival hacks, either one of these or perhaps both, and the surviving economic collapse book. These I think would fit everybody's library very nicely. They're not very expensive books. I think this one was it doesn't say the price there. I bought it from thrift store for maybe $5 or something. These ones, if you want to have a large library, why not, but wouldn't be the first ones I will buy. But I will link to all of these books in the description, and again, thanks for watching.